Thanks for joining us, everyone, once again. Now, I am with a stellar lineup of guitar greats from Manchester here. Stuart, Anton, Mike, and the esteemed John Helliwell. It's, wow. The Wild Axemen of Mancunia are before me to talk about their various works that they produced during MJF Originals in their time. Let's say hello to them, starting with you, Stuart.
Hello, I'm Stuart.
You are Stuart
nice to
McCallum?
see everyone. Yeah, Stuart McCallum, guitarist, Manchester.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anton. Sorry. Well, we can come back into more detail. Anton.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I'm Anton. Anton's also a guitarist, also
Yes.
knocking around Manchester.
Yeah. Mike, are you also a guitarist knocking around Manchester?
I'm not knocking around as much as I used to, but around Manchester as much as I used to. But yeah, Mike Walker, guitarist and soup maker.
Nice.
I've got a great soup maker, and I'm just diffusing about it at the moment because it's changed my life. Anyway, wow. We'll get into that in a bit, into the important details in a bit.
We'll tap you up for some recipes later, Mike, for that.
You do, yeah.
Yeah,
and John.
Yes, I'm John Helliwell. I'm a saxophone player, and I've got a great soup maker, and that's Christine Helliwell.
Okay. Is she there? Is she kind of waving her wooden spoon at you as she speaks as a threat?
Metaphorically, yes. She's in the background, and I come out and tell her after I've been on the phone or something. Yeah, I know, I could hear you.
Oh, thanks for joining us, everyone. It's great to see. We've just been doing a lot of these chats with some of the composers from the MJF Original series over, nearly 20, 25 years. Some amazing work has been produced. And it's no accident that I asked you to kind of join us on the same call, because you each took really different approaches to how you play the guitar and also what you did with your work that you produced for MJF Originals. And I just thought it'd be really nice to hear from you, your memories of not just Premiere, but the work itself and what you were trying to achieve with that work. And I'll start with Stuart. You created a piece called Chamber Pot for us back in 2007, I think it was. And here I have the brochure from MJF.
Wow.
Your page in. Yeah, Stuart.
Amazing.
There he is. So, Stuart, you had a really special guest on your piece, I seem to remember.
Yeah, John Sermon.
Yeah,
it was amazing to get John to do it. I'd met him a few years before on a gig that we both did in Marsden Jazz Festival, and then I met him again at this artist development scheme called Take 5, and he was the mentor teaching us for the week. And I just said, "Do you want to do a gig?" And he said, "Yeah, all right." So then I spoke to you, Steve, and you said, "Oh, well, we should do something at the Jazz Festival." And that's how it all came about, really. And what a guy.
You're also really interested in sort of bringing some, because as I remember, the piece, which I haven't listened to, I don't know if you've listened to it since 2007, but it seemed to combine like minimalism, some of your interests in jazz and electronic music as well. It was a really nice amalgamation of what you're into back then.
I think so. I think it was the first time that I'd really written a piece for that number of instruments, and the first time that I'd written a piece before it was played. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or certainly like a suite of music before it was played by the musicians. So kind of having to turn up to a rehearsal with completed music was certainly a different approach than I'd ever done before, and it was a real challenge to do that. I think some successes. There were some lovely bits and some less successful moments, but that's all part of the process, isn't it? I haven't listened to it for a long time. I listened to it yesterday as I found it on an old computer somewhere. The recording of it. There's some beautiful bits in it. Some beautiful playing by people on it. Obviously John Sermon, absolutely outrageous. Just incredible. What a high, super duper high level guy. And then like Andy Schofield, absolutely smashing it. Kind of really, raising to the level of John Sermon. Who else was on there? Richard Alves was on there, Neil Yates, John Ellis keyboard, Les Chisnell keyboard. Harold Roberts percussion and the string quartet, and me.
Yeah,
Me, the
you
young,
had to- yeah.
just the young whippersnapper getting completely obliterated by all these ridiculously talented people. Yeah.
That was really, I think that's been a feature of a lot of the MJF originals, is that the artists that have been leading have chosen to quite often surround themselves, not with just some of their favourite players, but actually people who are going to lift them up as well, either to the next level or to some kind of musical sphere that they haven't previously accessed. I think that was really clear.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was one of those moments where you realise the gulf between you and the people that you aspire to be. Like, yeah, which is a beautiful thing, isn't it? You know, it's nice to have that, to play with, to feel that, you know, to play, to be able to interact with that kind of energy and that experience, you know, in real time is different experience to listen to it on record, and I think it really kind of makes you appreciate the level of skill, ability, insight, you know, that they've got. Yeah,
and those players were fairly, it sounds like the players were really key to delivering that for you as well, because you chose
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I guess they were people that I'd watched
Yeah.
play since I was young in Manchester, and it was great just to bring them all together. And I guess they'd been such an influence on or they certainly been an influence on shaping my musicality and my outlook. It was nice to bring those people together and have that sound kind of emerge out of it, you know, that kind of sound that I'd aspired to kind of be a part of. Yeah, and I think there was enough room in the music, you know. It was a lot of the music was tonally fairly quite simple, so it kind of afforded that space for people to just, I don't know, fill their boots, for want of a better expression, but do it kind of collectively, and allowed space for this kind of sense of group agency to emerge kind of quite easily in a way that was quite melodic and textural, as opposed to kind of it having so much of the direction of the music taken by the harmony.
Yeah, that's really important. It's not in any work, but just commissioned work as well. Perhaps in jazz, not to overwrite, isn't it? Not to over compose everything. So you are leaving that space.
I mean, that's something I'm definitely learning how to do now. You know, even just for myself, like how to kind of write and how to create recording environments that best facilitate me. And you know, I think when we did, Mike and I did a couple of records, and the second one we went to a studio, and I was kind of trying to be super prepared, and Mike just goes, yeah, you know, I just got to leave space for me to do my thing, you know, and kind of wasn't totally prepared in a way that was really positive. And I think that was a great learning experience for me, of like noticing that little bit of added pressure and forcing that kind of in the moment magic was something that Mike was determined to have. You know, do you know what I mean? And because I think as improvisers, that's when the magic happens, isn't it? And it's that, sometimes that kind of, that high level searching skill is where the music kind of comes to life, you know, and that if it's overly prepared, then that kind of starts to diminish that magical qualities sometimes. So it's a balancing act, isn't it? You know?
Definitely, yeah. And you're choosing, going to come back to you, Mike, after this, but I think Anton, just hearing what Stuart was talking about there, about the choice of player and the kind of that context, I think that was something really key to your piece as well. Completely different sound world, but introduce us to what is still Article 11, the players and the concept behind that, because you also had a process behind the idea that was really fascinating.
Yeah, so like, I mean, as you're saying, that choosing the players is basically like is key in putting any sort of large group together. But so the process and the idea behind Article 11 was to try and get a little bit more of the voice of those individual players into the writing. So often with large group stuff, especially when there's not much time for rehearsal and stuff, things get written by the composer beforehand. Turn up at the first rehearsal. Maybe there's some room for like altering structure and stuff, but generally things are pretty well formed in the mind of the composer. And even if you're open to changing things, generally there's enough rehearsal time to actually like drastically alter anything. So what I wanted to do was to get some input from the musicians. So first of all, I asked like a bunch of my favourite players from kind of like the jazz and improvised music scene. So people like Sam Andre, Kath Roberts, Mette Rasmussen, my brother, and other people, and then I composed a 2 or 3 bar melody for each of those musicians, and sent that to them just on score and asked them to record themselves playing it, however they felt, and then immediately improvise afterwards and send me the recording. And some of those were kind of a continuation of the melody or a reaction against it, or in some instances it felt like the player and the part weren't actually like well suited, so I changed things around and so on. And then sort of listening to all that, took myself off up to somewhere in like the northeast, somewhere on the coast, and listened to it all, transcribed the bits that I liked, and stole it. So stole a nice baritone sax riff from Kath, and nice melodies from like Graham and Nick on trumpets. So Johnny, my brother, the drummer, replied with like 10 minutes of drum improvisation. So obviously I didn't transcribe that because who can be bothered. But then I would use that as like an audio stimulus, and I would play along to that, and kind of, I guess, trying to look for ways that you can approach some of that, the stuff that we do in small groups all the time. If you're meeting up and rehearsing regularly, you kind of bounce off each other, and you naturally develop ideas and pieces, kind of like, oh yeah, but with 11 people you can't really do that. So I was trying to get some of that feeling into the music, with the hope that then musicians felt some ownership over it, and that their voices were present in the work, as well as, of course, allowing space for that improvisation to happen in the moment.
And the title kind of captured that spirit as well, didn't it? Fortuitously.
Yeah. So I kind of, it takes me a while to come up with titles. I think actually all the pieces were just numbers on the gig, and it like when the album came out 3.5 years later, I eventually had titles for it. But the name Article 11, it sort of stems from the 11th. Hang on, I have to check the CD sleeve.
Which you have to hand.
Yeah, well, I've got boxes of them if anyone wants them. Article 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights says that everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and to freedom of association with others, including the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of their interests. And at the time, so Theresa May was the Home Secretary, and was making all sorts of noises about how she wanted to drop the Human Rights Act. And a big Amnesty International campaign against that, which in the short term succeeded, and it remains to be seen what happens, obviously. But yeah, it felt ridiculous that everyone would be talking about dropping a commitment to maintaining human rights, and then to read that one was about kind of trade unions, and Manchester's got a strong trade unionist history, and the kind of music we're making is collective, to whatever degree it's written or improvised. There's still a strong collective identity, and that idea of gathering together to do that. it sort of resonated for me.
And isn't it great that even as recently as 2014, that kind of music articulating that kind of resistance and struggle, as it did with the roots of free jazz, back in the 50s and 60s, it was still relevant as recently as 2014.
Yeah.
You were doing it there and then.
I mean, I guess it would have been better if it wasn't needed, but who knows?
Absolutely.
I guess there's always going to be something to struggle against, isn't there?
I have a question then. You know the original pieces of music that you sent out to each musician?
Yeah.
Was it something which came in your head first and then you chose that for the musician, or is it something you thought the musician might play anyway?
That's a good question. So the band was a mixture of people I'd worked really closely with, like my brother, like Sam, like Graham South, Nick Walters, and then some people I hadn't worked that closely with, but had always wanted to, like Seth Bennett, and at the time we worked with a lot since, and also Richard Foote, trombone player. We've worked together a lot since, but it was sort of a mix of like, oh, I really want to work with them, and the musicians that I'd played a lot with, I felt like it came quite naturally, and sometimes I'd like not kind of meditate on anyone's personality, but I'd have some people in mind as I was improvising or like thinking of ideas, or sometimes something would come up and be like, oh, that would really sit well with so and so. But then the ones I found more difficult were like with the people I was less close to musically, and so they sort of came later, or a little bit more of a struggle, I guess.
And did you have a connection between all the bits of music that you gave to them? They were just like picked out of.
Yeah, just
sort of random.
Yeah, because I didn't want to. Well, looking back, I realised a lot of the way that I write is in short phrases, like often quite loopable phrases. Maybe this links to the kind of minimalist thing that you mentioned before, but and so I sometimes the difficulty is like, I find as a composer is like moving past that. Like, yeah, this idea is great. I was going to sit on that for like 20 minutes. It's great. Yeah. So actually, like, sending those out to people, gave me more inspiration and pointed where the composition could go next. But yeah, they definitely weren't linked with any kind of meaningful way beforehand.
You knew that the musicians that you picked were going to be the ones which would make that ish in a way, that sort of you put them all together and then make a really super like an analogy with making food, perhaps. You know that if you get the right ingredients, something's good going to come out of it.
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, I guess that's the risk with any kind of big commissions, right? Any like jazz festival new commissions, like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, good.
I'd say like all the most of the, I've not been to them all, but most of the MGF original things tend to be a success. I remember both Stu and Mike's coming away feeling like, whoa, and then years later to go like, oh, I've got one. that was a good moment. But yeah, you hope that will happen, but it's always a risk, isn't it?
Well, it worked.
Thanks.
Stuart?
Yeah.
Stuart, you were just about to ask a question. What were you going to ask?
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, did it, like, I guess the process of doing that way of working, did that, has that influenced your compositional approach since then? So does it, when you're writing by yourself, does the way that they interpreted things and the way that you kind of understood what they'd done in their interpretation, is that giving you kind of stimulus for your own compositional processes, or is that or not?
What has happened is I've continued to work like that and continued to explore that. So if anything, it's sort of given me a bit more confidence that like a small idea can go a long way, sort of thing, and not kind of have to overthink or over orchestrate or over complicate.
It's like just chucking seeds out, isn't it, and seeing what grows and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Have you thought about using like different stimuli, so stuff like, I don't know, just like a sentence or something, as opposed to a musical phrase?
So So I explored some of this stuff. I went on to do a PhD in this kind of approach, and I use different stimulus in terms of sometimes I would send audio rather than like written, because that started to get a little bit limiting in certain instances.
Yeah.
But I've never been that comfortable like with words or like some people are incredible visual artists as well. I know I enjoy reading Mike's like poetry on the internet as and when it surfaces, but that's not me. Do you know what I mean? So I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I'm only asking. I was listening to a podcast the other day where this composer, he has stopped giving any notation scores.
Wow.
And it's all kind of verbal instructions.
Wow.
Or this is really interesting. Yeah, and I was also reading this Brian Eno article about I can't remember who the composer was. It was from like some experimental scene that from his label, which he ran in the 70s, and it was for a cappella like choir, this piece, and it just had a series of instructions about it was completely free, but there was a series of instructions, and it ended up that no matter what happened and what combination of people, a similar pattern would emerge from these instructions. So there was a real sense of compositional structure contained within that real simple idea. I just thought it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that that you've chosen a very specific compositional approach. I'm just wondering how that maybe fed into other aspects of your process.
Yeah. That would be interesting to check out. Do you remember who it was?
No. It's in a book called No. It's in a book called Audio Culture.
Oh yeah,
brilliant. Yeah. I'm sure you've got it if you've done a PhD.
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
It's in there. There's 2 Brian Eno articles. It's not the compositional tool one. It's generative music. I think it's about. It's interesting.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thanks, Anton. I mean, it was also interesting here talking about the relationships as well, that between the players that you chose, that, well, actually, that's something you wanted to capitalize upon, but also kind of challenge you. And I think that the relationships, and turning to you, Mike, absolutely key to your piece, Ropes. And I'm thinking specifically, obviously, of Ian, who you wrote the piece for, the soloist, but also the rest of the band that ended up playing on the first performance at the RNCM, including people like Les and Adam Nussbaum.
Yeah.
So, I mean, kind of bring us into the world of Ropes a bit more, Mike, because that was really a celebration of your kind of musical partnership with Ian, wasn't it? And
yeah, it ended up. I mean, initially you asked me to write something, so it was a commission, and I remember that we didn't know, because I mean, you said to me, what do you fancy doing? We can get a little bit of money together, and etc. etc. And then I said, well, something with a 22-piece orchestra would be nice, So, So it was a chance, and we didn't know whether it would come off.
Yeah.
So there was a kind of thing where we had to put in what I wanted to do, and then wait until to see if we got it or not. So, and they kept us waiting a little bit, and the gig was the possible gig was getting closer and closer. So I ended up only having 6 weeks to write that music. I didn't write a note before that, and so so writing for 22 strings, I'd written a little bit for strings before, for Madhouse and the whole thing there, but not to the extent that I did in Ropes. And then I had to think, well, who do I want to do this? And obviously Ian was in there. As you say, he's been a friend and collaborator of mine for years. So, and he just put so much into it, and smooths things out in a way that makes things a lot easier logistically. Because I can say to him, you know, what if I do this? And he'll say, yeah, that's fine. Write them that. They'll be fine, you know. And I remember saying to him, what if I'm writing something like this for clarinet? Write what you like. It's fine. It'll be, you know, it's a clarinet and it's facile. The facility of it is really, you know, I'll be able to play it, is what his thing was. And then when he saw it,
he changed his mind.
It took him aback a little bit, you know, because I really pushed him, especially in one of the pieces, which is Ropes 3. I really pushed him. It's a hard piece. It's a hard blow for him, that, you know. But I wrote things with people in mind, wrote things with Adam Nussbaum in mind, with Les in mind, you know. The idea of Ropes was shaped by a lot of factors. One was the time limit that I had, you know, writing all that music in such a short space of time. Another was a theme. So it's thematic, so the actual ideas of Ropes go all the way through the music, including the music that isn't a part of the suite. I revisited some older pieces like Madhouse and the whole thing there. I revisited that piece, which is an old piece, and then rewrote the strings in a certain way and tinkered with things so that some of the themes from Ropes would move naturally through. So I wanted it to feel like one whole experience. So it was a complete experiential thing for the audience and for the musicians, you know. But I don't know about the other guys, but it was quite nervy for me. I don't normally get nervous on events, but I don't know what it was like for Stu and Anton, but I was pretty nervous that night. I remember it. And
I think the thing that I've kind of really started to realise on those kind of gigs is that it's the gigs that everyone goes to watch you, right? It's not like a nice little gig where you're just playing to a few people and you're having a great time, just all relaxed, chilled out. You know, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. But then, you know, you've got that huge build up to it. You've got the rehearsals. You know, it's costing a fortune. You know, it's only going to happen once.
All of that.
And then everyone comes. Your parents come. Your uncles come. You know, just their cousins, long lost cousins from all over the world are there. You know, all your mates, maybe. You know, it's just like, bloody hell. You know, so much pressure. They're all texting, wanting to meet up beforehand, and all this stuff. And you're like, actually, I've spent so long writing all the music, I can't actually play guitar on it. And then everyone's looking at you for direction, and you're like, well, I can't even direct myself, let alone you guys.
Exactly. That it was all of that. I remember it. You know, like you know, we had to make a sort of little speech at the end of it or something, and I lost the power of speech. I just didn't know what the hell to say. You know. So
that is quite an unusual moment for you, isn't it?
For me, it is. It's not for you, but it is. But it is. We've started already. So, but it was complete. It was completely. It kind of went by in a blur. I managed to enjoy the pieces that because again, I think as Stuart just mentioned, I kind of forgot to write myself in. I wrote all the music for everybody else and forgot to write myself in. So I had to find a way of getting in there that was organic and natural and didn't feel like I was pasting myself in because it was my music, you know. I was kind of happy to watch it go by and be, as well as being the writer and collaborator, just an audience, you know. I was just happy to be an audience of my own music and just enjoy the experience as much as I possibly could. You know, but when we first went on stage, I realized that I couldn't see anything, and then my glasses were in the dressing room, you know, and then Adam Nussbaum said, I'll go and get my, and I thought, Adam Nussbaum's gone for my glasses. This is amazing, you know. It was a lovely experience, a lovely warm experience, but it was at the same time I felt much more nervous than I've done for a long time. I'm kind of over that thing now because I've since done things that were quite big, and for me big anyway. Again, I don't know about Stu and Anton, but that thing of saying I'm presenting who I am, you know, that kind of thing. You know, I'm more relaxed with that now. I don't hold so much store in that now, you know.
I think you're right. And in a way, that's kind of what we inadvertently want to achieve, I think, with all the MGF originals, is to actually encourage people like you to be artists, to be real artists, and actually more than just a musician or a performer or, you know, a composer. And I think part of that journey, which we only realized we were doing perhaps a way into the series, actually, not just creating a canon of work, but actually lifting people up and giving them an opportunity. But that, as you were saying, Mike, it brings with it quite a daunting prospect of, you know, responsibility and delivery to yourself as much as the audience. And I think everyone's on your side. Everyone wants it to be fantastic, and everyone's there rooting away. So in a way, you can't really go wrong, because no one's your enemy in the crowd. But they're just as you're saying, wanting to see the real you. Okay, this is the opportunity you've been given to create this thing that isn't you just playing someone else's material or someone else's thing. What have you got? Here we go. You know.
Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That thing of everybody like. Yeah, go for it.
Anton,
I've got to
say
shoot
goodbye
off.
to Anton.
Already kept a student waiting too long.
See you, Anton.
I'll definitely watch it back, so don't anyone say anything bad about me behind my back.
We won't.
Never.
Thanks for joining us, Anton.
Lovely to see you.
See you very soon.
Cheers.
See you, Anton. Bye.
Oh, thank goodness he's gone.
I know. God, he was so awful. He was so dull. I'm so ashamed of myself for asking Anton in there. Anton, don't worry. We love you, man. We love you. But
I'm going to try and stick around so that I'm the last person to go to and try and badmouth me, you know.
What an interesting approach he had there, wasn't it? I think that's a brilliant approach. Very inclusive.
It was great. And what we didn't mention, actually, because it took place in Central Library in Manchester just after it had reopened. Do you remember it had that big refurbishment a couple of years ago? And they created a new performance space in there. And it's a kind of blank canvas, really. But because they just opened and being a library, that openness and that place of coming together and learning and being in Manchester just outside, you know, where all kinds of movements have started, that felt really pertinent for his work to take place in the library as well. And it was great. And it was difficult music a lot of the time. And of course, we had sponsors back then. And I was thinking, oh God, what are they going to, you know, John, you probably remember this when we had Owen Mitchell sponsoring quite a few of these along the years. And we gave him this one, which, I mean, I was really excited because it was so risky, but a little bit nervous that we might, you know, lose the sponsorship because, but they stayed all the way through, because we didn't say to them, this is going to be really hard, you won't like it. We just presented it as another commissioned work.
You
so
know,
they
can
did
imagine the accountants are stayed in themselves, aren't you? But they seem to be quite open to it all.
Yeah.
They need a bit of madness in their lives, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
But just going back to what you're talking about, Mike, that the sort of combined pressure of opportunity and but that adrenaline that comes with it, and I suppose it opens up a new world, doesn't it? That you perhaps weren't thinking of before. Because then once you get past that, you've passed that little threshold. And as you were saying, well, I've done that now, so actually this might be possible next. You know, I can take this on.
I mean, I probably, if you hadn't have presented the opportunity, I probably wouldn't have gone there. You know, it's because it's not inexpensive getting all of those musicians together. You know, Adam on his own can break the bank. You know, so it was quite an expensive risk. You know. I mean, it came off in the end, and it was a beautiful success, you know, and it was just a lovely evening, really. I remember it as being a very warm, familial kind of evening, you know. And like you know, Stuart saying, you know, your local doctor is there, you know, your shopkeeper, you know, they're all there, you know, and it's that thing of as you were saying, that there's two sides to that coin of the fact that you can't lose. There's something else. There's another kind of pressure.
There's a real sense of expectation in there, isn't there? You know, everyone's rooting for you, but they're wanting to, you know, they want to go away with a feeling of that they've witnessed something unique and something special. Do you know what I mean? And I think that undercurrent of additional pressure that potentially maybe it's just us putting it on ourselves, but I do get a sense of that. But I don't know, there's so many factors involved in there, and I think for me the main thing I've realized is that I think looking back to that gig is there's so many stages in the process to get to the point and feel like you're ready, in always like holistically ready, not just ready having just got the music printed off that morning, kind of ready. Do you know what I mean? I think I would approach it quite differently now, but I guess that's what experience gives you, isn't it? And I think what I have realized is that I need people around me to help facilitate it, you know, and that doing it all yourself is not the answer. But it's taken time to realize that, you know, because we're sold that thing, you know, that kind of, we talked about it this the other day, but this triangular hierarchy of like one composer at the top, you know, orchestra, you know, composer, conductor, orchestra, audience gets bigger each time. And you know, since the Romantic period, that was the way things were. Do you know what I mean? Since they could sell sheet music, basically, you know, and there's the sense that this kind of notion of genius and all that kind of crap that we're kind of sold and have been sold, you know, within the record industry infrastructure, you know, that it's definitely had an impact on the way I thought I should approach doing it, you know, having never been taught how to do it.
And do you think sorry, Stuart, that pressure that you're talking about, what all of you are talking about, is that also comes about because you are the composer, you're also the performer, and you're the guitar player in the band. You're occupying a lot of roles where let's say you're the MD, you're the composer, you're the orchestrator, you're the arranger, you're the what's the part writer called? What are they called? The copyist, or
that's the one. You're the copyist. You're the manager. You're the potentially. Do you know what I mean? There's so many things, you know. And I've done MJF gigs. The last one I did was at the RNCM. It was quite, you know, a big thing. But I did a day sheet for everyone. You know, there was a lot of people coming on there, so I did like production, pre-production. Do you know what I mean? But it's just kind of all of those things that you think, well, actually, that means that I can get on that stage and just be a little bit more relaxed, because I don't have 20 people going, is there a buyout? You know, where are we meeting? What time's sound check? You know, you know, that 500 texts situation. So and that's let alone even just trying to get the music together and kind of getting it, you know, like, because I think like looking back at my commission, you know, I had strings, I had 2 flugelhorns, you know, saxophones, clarinet, organ, piano, and percussion, like tuned percussion and hand percussion, and guitar. So like that, you know, if I'd said to an orchestrator, this is what I've got, they would go, oh, look, think of the tone colors and we can blend this, that, there, you know, and actually I would need to work with someone to help get the most out of that combination of instruments, because that's not my skill set, you know, and just like actually knowing that and knowing that that's all right to do that, and the music will be better as a result of it, you know. Do you know what I mean? Just those kind of simple things that you don't have to do it all yourself, that I would do differently now. And I think having the support of the Jazz Festival around the kind of logistical side of it was really fantastic, you know, and having the venue sorted and the promotion sorted and somebody liaising with the musicians. But I think, kind of just more, for me anyway, you know, working with other people in the creation of the music would have been beneficial, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these conversations have really opened up the process, and people can understand that they might be coming to one of these performances. It takes an hour of their life to experience it, but you will put days, weeks, months of thought process and preparation, and and the amount of work that goes into someone coming along to a performance and being able to receive and experience that just for an hour. It's crazy proportion, but I guess that's what great art is about. You kind of consume it at the point in a different time space than in which it was created. But it's interesting.
It's and the point is that it's not the audience's concern as to how much time and effort has gone into a performance. It could be years of someone's work, or it could be 5 minutes of someone's work. You know, but that's not important. And it could be that you've travelled for 3 days to get there, or you've just come round the corner 5 minutes.
They're not bothered, are they?
No. They're not. No, it shouldn't bother them at all.
No. Why should it?
That's why it's
interesting. There's an interesting. Sorry,
someone's moaning. Someone on stage is moaning. Oh, I've had such a bad day, or something. It's not for the audience. You just go out and say, "Hey," and play.
It's kind of analogous to what Stuart was saying before about when we were in the studio. Me and Stu was in the studio at Real World, and there's because we can play the numbers, and we can play the numbers really well together, play by the numbers really well together. I mean, or we can look for something that's outside of that periphery, where there's more risk and there's more and things happen that we that wouldn't have happened had we not been there together. So individually, they just would not have happened. And I'm not talking just sonically there. I'm talking about the way the ideas wrap around each other, both horizontally and vertically. So it's a great example of that was Alfie, because when we did Alfie, we probably, I can't remember how many takes we did, Stu. 3 takes. Was it 3?
2 or 3, I think.
It was 3 takes. And I kind of weaved stuff around Stuart's thing, and that's the way it was. So he had to trust me. So we have this kind of trust bond that's going on, because initially Stu had got this lovely sort of thing together, and then what the actual idea was is what happened is that I painted around this picture that he'd already painted, and it was this clash of coming together and the sinews coming together. It had a lovely thing. It didn't always work live, but most of the time it did. I found it actually worked more times live than I really thought it would. where people would come up and say, "Oh, that arrangement of such and such a thing was lovely," and I'd say, "Well, actually, we just kind of did that. That's what it happened tonight. Yeah. So it's analogous to that kind of where you're giving yourself to the elements, and letting the chips fall where they fall. And in the studio, that's quite a thing, especially when it's in a place like Real World and people are there who have got an investment in there, etc., and they're listening, and we're just doing our thing. But there were some beautiful things that came out of that for that album. And Alfie was a particular one for me that came out that was quite a special moment, I think, in terms of the way those two things come together and make one thing as an individual whole. It was
I think that for me, I think something I've observed is the way that we play is that I think my approach has definitely been leaving space, generally in my music, and kind of I guess almost like trying to strip away the kind of jazz history of my playing, just to kind of get to the core of who I am, that without that kind of more complex harmonic approach. And now actually I'm kind of bringing a bit of the harmony back in again, but I think your approach it's spacious, but in a kind of more adventurous way, and a kind of like denser voicings, very considered and very very thought through in its approach, but kind of the denser, so the kind of, you have my spacious thing and then your denser bits just kind of fit in and weave around that. And I think that for me, that's the kind of reason that we can play together as guitarists, and it's not a massive shred fest.
Oh god, yeah. No, it's music first.
Yeah. And also what strikes me is what we're both talking about is using the familiar to help you get to the unfamiliar, perhaps. And you kind of, and that's, I guess, what you're doing when you're writing a commission, any new piece, where you're combining those two forces, aren't you? And it's like, well, can I use a little bit of stability of what I know to get me to this unknown place that is the new work, the new music, the new experience. And that I found that through all these conversations we've been having, actually, I think you probably agree, John, they've all been various ratios of the familiar and the unfamiliar that people have used to create something new.
Yeah, to push themselves. And it's good.
Yeah. But that in essence is what creativity is, isn't it? And I think that can work in a way that's psychologically new for you. Or capital C creativity is where it's historically creative for the entire world and for humanity, and that's obviously the second one is a lot rarer, but I think that kind of, certainly that sense of psychologically creative for the individual is something where it's that kind of advancement of your own individual knowledge and ability, isn't it?
Yeah, great.
Which I guess, having to work in a new environment and potentially writing for different forces or different, just writing for something different forces that advancement, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think we've certainly forced a lot of artists to do things over the years. Hopefully they've been proud of their results. But just to sum up, really, it's been great to hear all three of you, and especially talking to you two, Stuart and Mike, about some of your work as duo as well, playing as well. It's been really interesting. I think that's played an important part in the musical development. But
I was just thinking about this, actually. I've got
Go on, Stuart.
This is the one guitar that we always talked about collaborating with, but actually
wow.
Yeah, do you remember that, Mike?
I do.
Yeah. Casio G20.
You've done it.
Yeah.
Well done. Second thoughts.
Album 3.
Yeah.
On second thoughts, mate.
Have you got to go, Mike?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
That's it, The engine's running. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, no, thanks so much, guys. It's been great chatting to you. And it's great to delve back into time as well. And thanks for remembering those pieces of work with us, you know, back to 2007, 2008. And thanks to Anton as well. It's been great to include you in these discussions and the memories of MJF over the 25 years as well. And
hey, keep making that jazz, guys.
Keeping the jazz, keep the jazz alive.
Keep it going. Great.
Thanks for
for your
having us,
time.
Steve.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. See you, boys.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.